Hello there. With the year coming to a close, we thought this would be a nice time to give you an opportunity to get to know us a little bit better. In our shows, we generally stay in character, which means that you get very few opportunities to learn about who we are as people. In our Patreon feed, we have a Q&A show called Ask for the Moon, in which we answer questions asked by our patrons. We have a lot of fun answering these questions, and it hopefully also offers a view into who we are and how we think. Here is an episode from November, which we thought could be a nice teaser for what awaits over on Patreon. Ask for the Moon is available at the $1 per month level, and we release one episode every month. So head over to Patreon, help the show, and help us make more of this lovely content. Without further ado, here is Ask for the Moon.
Craig and Matthias, great to see you. Come in. I've just put the hamsters in the microwave and the kittens in the tumble dryer. Come in. How are you today?
The hamsters are in the microwave?
Yes, the gerbils, technically.
Oh, okay.
Are you not hungry?
Well, I am, but are they like popcorn or what?
Yes, they pop after a while. First the eyes pop, and then the rest of the body. It's great for your diabetes.
Ah, yes, I'm looking forward to eating some of the popcorn gerbils. They
Very
taste
good,
so good.
Yes, Craig. Especially
when you eat their eyeballs first. Come, Matthias, it's time for you to enter the microwave.
Yes, Matthias. No, it's not your turn yet. First, we must answer the question.
In there first. Just all of them.
First, we must answer the question. Let me just close the tumble dryer and get the kitten started. There we go. Oh, there we go. Look at those little fellas spinning around. Look at the spinning. That's funny. Let's see.
You might have to clean now.
Yes, I will clean the washing. I forgot to take it, put it in along with them. I will have to.
You're gonna put your laundry in with the poor hamsters.
I would normally put it in with the kittens in the tumble dryer, but I had a fresh batch of laundry that needed to be cleaned. Or
I think PETA might have some kind of problem with what's going on here. This is not ethical treatment.
Silence! You will enter the microwave now.
No, he must not. Not yet. First, he must answer for his crimes and his questions. Isn't that right,
I see. Questions without answers. Answers without questions.
Yes. Let's see. We have questions and we have answers. Mr. Johannes Johansson, thank you.
Yes, I'm a massive.
Craig, stop it, you're interrupting everything.
What? You have a massive what?
Let's see.
That's too much, Craig.
I'm going to focus a bit now because there's too much of the hamsters, I feel. They're not ready yet. So...
Okay.
I thought this was pretty good input, actually, so sorry about that, Johannes. I'm being a bit silly today. Regarding how much you reveal about the characters from the get-go, I would say that I value receiving at least some basic info about the characters. The reason for this is that I don't listen to your podcast just for the narrative and the great stories being presented and told, but also for the experience of great role-playing. Okay, so I think this is very interesting. Now I'm talking as Hjalmar, because I'm having the same voice as I'm reading the question, just to clarify that. And I didn't think of that, you guys, when before, because somehow it's kind of turned into almost this sort of radio theatre-esque sort of feel to it. And I didn't think so much about the approach of, telling them what we're going to play and then they get sort of, oh, interesting, let's see how they will play this. And then you play it as much as, okay, let's create something that will grow, and they will not know much from the start, but they will get to know the characters as we play. Did you guys think of this? What about you, Craig?
So, it's interesting, because I feel that I don't really know which approach is better. I prefer a little more mystery, but it does depend on the game you're playing, I think. I think in some games it matters quite a lot, especially popular games. People do want to know sort of what your class is and some of the skills you have, because they play the same thing and they're interested. You know what I mean? They how's he going to interpret Divine Smite? Or, he was going to play my favourite clan in that game. Oh, that's going to be fun, So, yeah, but I do think what we do is a combination of both, because, yes, we do stuff to make good narrative, but I'm still role-playing. Like, I don't just do the thing as an author where I go, my character will now do this. I try and come up with, okay, why would my character do this? Let's try and work it in. And then... Yeah,
exactly. I like I always like sort of reflecting a little bit with my character so that you get to hear sort of the thoughts. And I think that's kind of grown out from you doing that, Craig. And I know we discussed this as an earlier stage as well, about having sort of inner reflections and getting to know the characters that way as well. But I didn't sort of draw the parallel between, people who, they're actually obviously role-playing fans, because that's probably why you listen to an RPG podcast, but that they would come in listening for great role-playing based on what kind of character they know that you're going to play. I don't know. Matthias, what do you think?
Well, I think that people listen to actual play podcasts for many different reasons, and they're looking to get different things out of the experience. I think a lot of people are listening for, hearing the group dynamic, hearing the humor, hearing kind of the people behind playing a game, and then sort of a little bit of maybe drama, but primarily it's really about the people. Whereas I think a lot of the people who listen to our show is really interested in like these characters being believable and having sort of an immersive experience. And I think in general our stance has been to try to keep the immersion breaking things to a very, very minimum, and really try to get close to that audio drama feel. But when it comes to doing like internal monologues, those kinds of things, I think that fits really, really perfectly in, and I think it's been certainly a lot of fun. I think it's the important thing about internal monologues is just, you got to remember to also interact with the other characters, and not just be speaking to yourself all the time or to NPCs, but really interacting within the group.
It's also something I admit, when we have our one-shots or with people I'm not as familiar with, I do a little less, because I feel a little like I don't want to come across like I talk to myself all the time kind of person. It's like, these are new people, let's play with them. Yeah.
I did a guest appearance for another thing yesterday that I'm not allowed to talk about, but I can say that I was the only player, and then there was just the game master, and in that regard, suddenly you are left with filling a lot of space. I just found. So for me to sort of try and figure out where I was going and what I wanted to do, I sort of had to go into the character, like, what do my character want to do? And then I sort of had to create or fill it out a bit with my inner monologue, like what I was going to do, but that needs less and less space, and from going to a campaign where you might put it in a few times, because there's space for it, to going to a one-shot, I suppose, with multiple people, then that's where there'd be minimal sort of space for that kind of thing, because then everyone needs to come through anyway. Like our Island of the Dead, for example.
Island of the Dead.
But so I guess that's what you meant, right, Craig? That in that there, for example, there wasn't much time for inner monologues.
Well, there was, but I don't know. I mean, sort of more like when you got, but if there's a heavy narrative action happening, it feels a bit strange to be like, I sit there and really think about it. Oh, so you don't want to take up too much, and bigger when a group gets big as well.
Yeah.
Like, when you get to your 5-6 players, then it feels you feel a bit like, I don't want to. Oh, here I am talking about how my character feels. I see two other people going like, oh, it's my turn. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I think what I've really liked is what we both did in Strahd as well as Black Madonna, where there is a narrative start. The GM describes the setting, and then the characters come in, and you just ask us to describe the characters. Basically, that for me feels enough. If you don't know anything from before, that you just get your characters described, and then you get a image of them, and then sort of their actions kind of paint the rest.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's like you say, Matthias, you listen to podcasts for different reasons, I suppose.
Yeah, I think definitely people do that, because to me, like, I'm not really that interested in systems, to be honest. I'm interested in having a system that supports creating a good narrative and that doesn't get in the way. But I mean, I know of plenty of people who have kind of been a little bit disappointed in a podcast that takes sort of that audio drama take, and they're looking for more like really actual play. If you think like it really like people talking about rules, explaining how rules work, explaining, oh, now I'm going to roll this dice to get to do this particular action, and now we're in this part of the initiative order, and really make it technical so that they can use the podcast as a way of learning how to play the game. And also, I suppose that way you create you make it more approachable in a way. I think if you're listening to an edited show like ours, for example, it can seem almost too professional at times. It can seem like, wow, my group is never going to be able to reach that level. Or when you're playing, you're sort of comparing yourself to something that has been edited, and then you kind of feel bad that you're not really reaching the same place. So
yeah,
so some people,
or you don't understand, like, what are they rolling for? How is the system working?
Exactly. I mean, like, our first episode, we didn't have a single dice roll, so people were like, what are you playing even? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Of the Black Madonna. So yeah, people come into these shows for different reasons, and I think that I think I like our overall approach with keeping things as immersive as possible. But I do see that there can be a place for introducing who we are, especially if you have a guest. Who is this guest? Those kinds of things. But it should be done I feel like it should be done in a quick way. It shouldn't like drag on forever, because at least I am interested in hearing the actual playing. That's what I'm there for the podcast for. I'm not there to hear like 10 minutes of intro and going about like talking about where you can find people on social media and all that crap. I mean, it's because some shows do that. I want to get into the action quickly. So that's been one of the reasons why I think we've tended to take that approach. But we've tried a little bit of different approaches, really, it's interesting to hear what people think.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you for that, Johannes. Thank you for your feedback there and answering our questions, because it is we do like that. Whatever you think, I mean, feel free to give us your thoughts always, patrons, on what we would do, everything we say and what we do. We are very open to feedback, especially from you guys, who we know are already supporting us. So, he also says that he enjoyed the Island of the Dead experience and the Black Madonna, and that it's very nice to hear as well the different kinds of social interactions that we had there, which depended a lot on the players. And I hope that you all will enjoy that as well for Taroticum, which we have gotten some very nice feedback from already, so thank you for that. I mean, I've been a little bit worried about how we handle things there, because suddenly we have such different characters all of a sudden. So it's super exciting how that's kind of unfolding.
Yes, it's a very different adventure already, and the characters are very different in a way that I felt challenged in a good way, but I felt a bit more like, I need to really think how this works, and we're very thankful that apparently you guys are liking it so far. That's reassuring.
Yeah, and I'm sort of shocked by my character how he sort of wants to push the leads and the story, which trying not to reveal too much is I feel a bit I don't know, it just feels I am constantly surprised about what I'm doing. Sort of.
Well, you could argue for you that's actually maybe a new thing, because most of your predominant characters up to this point have maybe been a little more, as you said, either passive or kind of like dutiful, but not really. I mean, if we were to Roshick, for example, kind of just had what he wanted to do, and he went and did
Yeah.
it. But all the little side distractions, he was always a bit like, Roman, what do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. It's so much fun. So I hope you'll enjoy that. And thank you also for the recommendation of The Haunting of Hill House, which is a Netflix series. Did you guys see that one?
I did.
Ooh.
I have not yet, no. But it looks spooky.
I watched the
Spooky.
whole thing, and in a very quick review, I will say I enjoyed it mostly, yes. There was some good spookiness, some great camera work, some good twists, interesting character development. I won't say anything about the ending. But
Endings are hard.
endings are hard, there you go, we'll say that. But otherwise, as a series, I would recommend watching it. I watched the whole thing in a couple of days over Halloween, and yeah, I liked it. I especially liked some of the horror aspects. I was like thinking, there you go, that would be a good horror thing to do. I wouldn't say it was terrifying, but to be honest with you, I think it was one of those shows where the story was more about interesting characters. Like, it was like, oh, that
Okay.
is creepy, but okay, character drama.
Sounds
And
a
for
lot
you-
more like something that I would be interested in, because
Yeah.
then I won't have too many nightmares.
Well, I also feel, to be honest, most of the time, some of the best horrors are the ones that aren't like, oh my god, it's terrifying, but are more just like, it's interesting. A good horror film is when there's actually something interesting happening as well, beyond just, oh no, there's a monster in the basement.
Yeah.
Oh no, there's a guy killing the kids at the summer camp.
Yeah, exactly. Cool.
So yes,
Right.
I did watch that, yes.
And I shall certainly endeavor to check it out. I have been craving for some kind of darkness in my life, some more darkness in my life, and I think that might be just what I need now.
Too
In
much
fact, you know what?
gankiness?
Yes, a
You
little
know
bit too
what?
much. Yes.
It did have, I mean, it's not quite cult, but it had cult elements to it, now I think about it.
Mm.
In terms of
Cool.
characters having dark secrets and their lives and all that affecting them. So
Yeah, that's what Johannes writes as well, that the new kind of KDL adventures building on dark secrets and so forth, and thus he came to think of the series.
Hmm.
So it's funny that you see that parallel as well.
Indeed.
Okay, but then we actually have some questions for us to discuss, and these are from Johannes Johansson, and as
We should-
opposed to the other things. But
We should perhaps also say thanks to Pat and to Tom for commenting on the way that we introduce characters and how we do things. So thanks you guys for letting us know what you think and for supporting our approach. Basically, it's really good and it's been great to have you along for the journey for such a long time. So keep it up.
yeah, guys, we really, really appreciate it. I mean, all that feedback we get from you it's amazing and very inspiring. So thank you, and thank you so much for the comments there you've gone on for and done for the Taroticum stuff as well. I love the idea. One of you wrote that you maybe I already said this, but I'm still like every time I think about it, it makes me happy. Like, was it Per Klingberg that wrote I'm listening to the Raw now, and I can't wait to listen to the edit as well and compare them, like totally fanboying and stuff. It's just like
that
yes.
was quite nice. Yeah, that was nice.
It feels like it feels like we're delivering on two different fronts there, really. When you think that the Raws are interesting in a different way than the edits are, and then seeing like the difference between them and stuff. Amazing. So thank you. Right, so things to talk about could be: are there some pointers you work with as game masters in how you choose the pace, the unfolding of a story, or choose to pace the unfolding of a story? And this is about the element of pacing when it comes to telling, presenting, and acting that Johannes has some questions about. So, should we start about that one then? Pacing as game masters, and I don't have too much experience with that myself because I've still not game mastered anything. Maybe I should do something for like 1st of April next year as a joke that I'm going to start a new campaign. What do you think about that, guys?
I think you should totally start a new campaign. I think you should be a GM. I'm sure you would do a fantastic job. So
Yes.
I think we should find something. We talked about it in the past, right? So I think, one day it will come.
One day when we have even a little bit more support, so I can stop doing other stuff and get more into this. Yes.
Exactly. But I suppose in regard to the question, I would say I don't really know. I try and keep pacing quick. It's just what I am into. I feel moments in stories where characters are relaxed, when they have time to think on things, you can have a slower pace. Atmosphere building as well is important in pacing, but I feel when the action hits the fan, I tend to like things moving quickly. But what I try and do is I don't like being the kind of DM who goes, you need to do this now. I try and give incentive or have the world react in ways that imply you need to be quick. So it's like, we're in the building, what do we do? And I'll say, like, the guards are coming. And you can continue all you want, like having a slow conversation, examining the room, but I'll just say the guards are going to be there, and then eventually those guards are going to come in the room and ambush you. So it's up to you. It's like, if you want to get out of there safely, you should go now, but if you really do want to stick around, the narrative isn't going to stop for you, basically, is what I imply in those scenarios. I feel that gives your players a little more sort of like involvement, rather than just saying, like, you don't have any time, you have, like, you know, like, you're investigating the police room. Suddenly the guards are coming, you have to leave. Like, in that sentence, I kind of made you leave, if you know what I mean. But giving you, like, you feel here the guards are coming, what do? It still gives you roleplay, but also just implies, like, just so you know, things are happening, you might need to be, you know, a bit quicker.
Yeah, I mean, you need to ensure that the players never feel like they've lost agency of what's happening, that they don't end up being like these passive passengers on a train that's taking them somewhere where, you know, where they can't really control. I mean, definitely there is often reason to try to hurry a scene along a little bit, because you want to keep a nice narrative flow, especially when you're talking to like important NPCs, for example, like, or NPCs that you want to be a little bit mysterious. If you allow those scenes to sort of just meander on for too long, you might end up with these characters not really feeling mysterious or particularly interesting, or them having to answer questions that don't really, how can I say, support the building of that character, or that you as a GM don't necessarily have a good, interesting answer for. So what I tend to do, especially in scenes where you have those sort of, you want to have those like cinematic kind of interactions with an important NPC, in there I usually try to look for ways to sort of hurry it along, not in a forced way, but really sort of try to make it natural, to sort of try to exit that conversation, to move on and to sort of keep the pace going, and not to get stuck.
That said, I feel when you've got, as I've seen in some of the streams I watch, I do enjoy a good character conversation. When another player is talking to another player about something really like, here's how I felt about this, and maybe there's even conflict, like that actually goes by quickly, even though they've been talking 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't like, and this is personal preference entirely, but I'm not a big fan of the plan talk.
Yeah.
Those I get bored of immensely.
Yeah.
How are we going to break into the building? Well, we could do it this way. Oh, but we could also do it this way. Oh, but actually, we could also do it this way. And then 20 minutes will have been spent. How do we do it pretending all to be in disguise? And then they go, actually, let's not do that. Like, wait, oh.
Yeah, totally. I mean, those conversations I think we have tried to to stay away from, and I think it comes down also to how you as a GM are in a way allowing for. You don't create a feel like a kind of game where the players feel like they have to do that in order to not screw up. Where the players don't feel like they can't make mistakes, that if they make a mistake they will be humiliated by the GM, but rather feel safe in that, even if we kind of go in a little bit half-cocked into this, it's going to be cool, it's going to be interesting, and it's going to lead to something. Maybe we won't succeed as well as we would have if we would have created a perfect plan, let's say, but at the end of the day, what is it that the commanders in war say, that like when the first bullet is fired, the plan goes out the window, because it doesn't.
Yeah.
Then things change. Yeah, I fully agree with you there. The planning stuff is horribly boring to listen to. So I think we've tried to steer away from that. And
I mean, you made in my style of Curse of Strahd, I either said nothing when it came to planning, or when you asked, does this NPC have an idea? The NPC would give you one, here is my plan, what do you think? And then you guys tended to go, okay. And I was like, brilliant, excellent, you just like that plan. or you came up with your own and just went with it. You were like, let's do this. And I'm like, brilliant, let's do it. Let's do that one thing. Move on, let's ride,
Yeah.
Or it's like in Coriolis, like whenever we stopped and started discussing like how to do something, for more than like half a minute, there's suddenly a and the Katra jumps out of the the shaft on the side.
Yes, and it's like, oh crap. Not to mention as well, we all defer to our captain in Coriolis. I'm just like, what do you think, Captain? Just do it.
Not always to Jenny's liking, but it's great. It's like she's really this. She doesn't want to be captain, but then in the latest episode, for example, not to give, I mean, it's not a big spoiler, but when Carlos suggests that let's just leave everyone and go, like really trying to push things, then the captain says, no, I would really like to take as many as possible. So she's still making a stand, it's just yeah, it's great. I feel that in most of the campaigns and the games that we've played, there is usually something pushing us if we stand still for a bit too long, or there is a natural way leading into something. And I found editing this stuff with Coriolis that my favorite sections are when you get a nice ambient track and players, like you say, are talking about things and about themselves, about the world. They have gotten into a nice conversation, and I just find that time just flows by, and it's so atmospheric in a way.
Yeah.
It's just really interesting.
And when players have good ideas as well, because that's an important thing. I do agree, like with some of the sentiment of role playing, that half the game is players, maybe more than half. Like, it's supposed to be what they want to do, and when they tell you what they want to do, you should listen. You shouldn't just be like, no, or like boring. If you ask them, how are you going to approach this problem, and they actually come up with a really interesting way of doing it, you should embrace that. You should go, oh, cool, okay, how can we make this work? I mean, unless it's completely impossible.
Yeah.
I
like
mean,
that a lot.
The standard answer should always be like yes and. It's like you should always be building off of what they're giving you, and making cool stuff out of it, and make it feel like this liberating experience where you don't have to be afraid of putting out a bad idea or a stupid idea or anything like that, but just you put out what you think would be cool to do, and then together as a group and with the GM support, you can make something cool out of it. And again, it doesn't mean that everything has to succeed. It's just everything should turn into something cool, and should you should reward the players for being active. And
that feels like a challenge to me as a GM, and I'm very impressed with you guys when you do it, that if there is an idea that you weren't prepared for, that the players have, that, okay, what if we try and do it this way, and it's something that you like, as a GM, perhaps that this won't work. You could, that door that they want to go through is going to be locked, or trying to blow it up won't really work because it's reinforced in this or that way. But they want to try blowing it up, and it could lead into something,
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and I mean, you
Not
can
like
you
just
can
the
have that.
realization that it's impossible. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and it shouldn't just end in like a failure. Then in that case, there should always be this fail forward. There should always, especially when you're doing a podcast, it should always be progress coming out of it. It shouldn't be like you go and you try to do something, you fail your role, and okay, now we're just stuck. You know, I think
Yes.
Yeah.
Robin was talking about that for Gumshoe also, for example. That's one of the things that he's wanted to take away from that system to always keep things moving forward. Especially important in a podcast, I think. And conversations between characters they're super interesting. You know, I think as long as it feels like the characters know what they should be doing, like it doesn't feel like they're stuck. And then personally, I guess I also like it when the characters have, I don't know, like the interactions are really sort of building the character, and we're learning more and more about them, and it's not just them kind of squabbling or something like that, because that I'm not really a fan of listening to, at least.
Well, it's a chance for the players as well to explore the characters.
I had in a little amateur game I was playing recently, a wonderful bit of, no, it wasn't terrible PvP, it didn't ruin, it was fun, but part of me was thinking like, oh god, like we were like, oh, I would try and throw the potion on the floor, I try and stop them throwing the potion on the floor, I get in the way and also try and stop them, and then I cast this lightning bolt to stop him stopping me, and my character actually just was watching the whole thing, and she was like, what do you do? I was like, I'm just trying to tell everyone to stop, like, what are you doing? It's stupid. So just let that character do their silly thing. Trying to stop someone doing something, in my experience, especially with newer players, which some people were, it doesn't really end up being fun. It just ends up being, because everyone has this thing where they don't want someone else telling them what they can't do.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
Especially the DM, but other players are more, because the DM is like, okay, he's the DM, but other players, oh my god, no, I try and grab something, my player tries to stop you. People hate that. It never goes down well. It never goes like, unless if you're already experienced, it's a bit better. But when you're brand new, people are like, no, it's like saying, they see it like playing a game of Monopoly, and someone tells you, you can't have your turn. What do you mean I can't have my turn? It's my go. Nope, you can't. So they always get a little heated, like, I want to roll against that, and then everyone's rolling against everything, and I get it, and the pace goes. It's gone. We spent about 40 minutes in the room with this encounter, and it was like, ugh.
Yeah. I remember plenty of situations like that from when I was young, when I was in like junior high school, and in those groups with a lot less mature players, it certainly turned into that once in a while. And it never really left a good feeling in your mouth afterwards, whether you were the person who sort of stopped something or were stopped. So I think it should always really be about, let people do what they want to do, and then you have this sort of contract within the group that you're going to make something cool out of whatever's done. There's going to be something interesting coming from it, and it's not going to be, humiliating the player for doing something that was stupid.
Or if that's the game you're playing, that's the game you're playing from the start. And I said there's some brilliant games that do that, but they're designed for it. Like, I actually think one thing I've realized about D&D recently is, I think D&D is the worst PvP game ever. It's not at all. It never is good in D&D. I mean, you can make it fun and silly, but most of the time, the game itself is not designed for it. It's not designed to go against other people. It's supposed to be a working together game. That's how I feel. Maybe feel free to give me examples of Patreons, but I just feel D&D at the heart of what D&D is successful is players playing together. When you play against each other, it just doesn't work. And it's not the game's fault because it's not designed for it.
So then, might I take it that you have some question marks around the newly launched RPGsports.tv, where you can win $5,000?
No,
by winning this league or championship that they have. It's our friends at Encounter Roleplay that are doing that.
Because that is competitive. There's a difference between playing against each other in a sport-like environment and playing, like for example, I feel free. I doubt they go, you have to race, and then the first player goes, I blind them with a bomb and then jump on them and stab you in the head 10 times so you can't compete. I imagine they race and compete, and like in a sportsman way. That's completely different. Again, that's the setting. They've set it up to work like that. That's the premise from the beginning. It's not like, this is actually a lovely adventure. Oh wait, no, now you're fighting.
Yeah, I should say I haven't actually seen that, but hey, if you want to see like how D&D is competitive, I think they've run one session. I hear it didn't really work out so well yet, but they're trying to make D&D into a sport, which is at the very least interesting. It's certainly new, so let's see how that goes.
Certainly. And again, also, all of that was back to the pacing question for me. It's like, at the end of the day, if you enjoy planning, if you enjoy that sort of play, that's fine. You know what? We're supposed to be having games, playing these games to have fun. But in regard to the question about pacing, as a DM, that's my view on it. I don't like things going on forever, so I try and make them fun, but pacey.
Yeah, and Blades in the Dark, for example, is a game that solves that planning bit in a really cool way. I think we've discussed that game in the past as well. But I mean, there you start the heist, basically, and then if you come up against an obstacle, you do a flashback, and you say, okay, so in order to overcome this thing, I prepared this thing earlier. And then you sort of bring in your solution into real time. And you make that be this kind of cool, like Ocean's 11 type thing. And that's a really great way of ensuring that you don't end up spending so much time planning a thing, but you're really playing it. I think that's a really cool way of solving things.
Yeah, I agree. That I often, or sometimes, you know, I've kind of feel that I wished that I had said something before about how I prepared for something, and I felt it now during when we started the actual Emissary Lost campaign, for example, which starts in a quite of a heist-like situation. I felt like, I wish I had done this, or announced that I had done this before, and yeah, maybe it's nice to be open for those kinds of things as well when it fits.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we've talked about that in the past, but this idea of competent player characters, that the player characters, even if you are not maybe prepared as a player, the player characters are supposed to be these ninjas or, you know, experts in their field, so they should always appear competent. And then for me as a GM, I feel okay with like letting some things like that go through, like just knowing that, the character would have prepared for that, so that's okay. But that's one style of doing it, and if you look at like OSR and these very like more simulation focused ways of playing, certainly that's not how it works there, because that's not the point of those games. The point of those games is really sort of letting that simulation, that rule system happen, and then sort of see what comes out of that. You know, there's nothing really prepared. There's only this machine that you're interacting with, and then what comes out of it is a surprise to everyone, which is cool.
Yes. No, Blades of the Dark definitely had some good ideas. It's hard to run though. I found I wasn't as quick on my feet creatively as I thought I was.
Thinking out devil's bargains and stuff like that.
Yes. But I don't know. I like the book. And who knows? I think our original reason for it not being on our list of plays was because it doesn't have any published material. But who knows? And we've been changing our way a little. So maybe we could do a little sandbox adventure. Ooh.
Yeah. Or if someone wants to run it with us, let's see.
Yes.
Well, the next question about pacing is it important to find a certain rhythms or consistent pace over the course of an adventure? So I interpret this question as that it's not like too choppy, like something goes quickly and then it takes a long time and something goes choppy. Is that important, do you think?
I mean, it's important that things don't feel rushed, I think. But then I think that when you have established certain things, especially once you get deeper into the action, so to speak, I feel perfectly fine about having a pretty quick pace. I mean, you noticed that in the Black Madonna, for example, where we started out super slow, but then really sort of picked up the pace towards the end, because things had just escalated so much that starting to break things up then, and like, you know, you're on your way to Poland, like playing out a scene where you're like going to buy that Polish fast food and, you know, interacting with the man operating the register, would perhaps not have, I mean, it would have been interesting, but at that point things were moving really, really quickly forward. So I think that it should probably change, but it should never feel rushed, and you should always leave a lot of space for the players to play out their characters, so that it doesn't turn into that kind of bad railroad that we all want to avoid.
Yes, I don't think I'm too worried about things being consistent, as long as players are happy. So if your players, you tell me, oh no, like hell in Curse of Strahd, we at one point said like, oh, it'd be nice if we got a little bit more character time before we moved on to the next bit, and I was like, fine, let's slow that bit down. And then when you were like, let's finish, I sped it up again, and that worked for me. It worked for the people. And again, like as long as like you are all happy. I agree with a bit quick paciness, but I don't feel you have to be consistent with it. I don't feel if you establish this is a quick game, it always needs to be quick. It's a slow game, it always needs to be slow.
Yeah, it's a bit tricky as a player sometimes, because as a player you can get used to like, okay, so this is how this one is sort of trotting along, and I could feel that a little bit in the Black Madonna, for example, that I got used to a certain slow pace there in the start, and then when we suddenly were moving very fast, I occasionally got a bit confused as to, what's going on? I didn't like feel that I had completely the time for my character to, or for me to get into the character's head. What states did this character go through during that bit, for example? So then you might have to, if the GM, for example, makes a sort of a jump like that, I think it's important for the GM to be prepared to leave a little bit of extra space for the characters to sort of summarize themselves as well. So if you say that, okay, so now you are at this place and now this has happened and this has gone by, what did your character think of during this time, or what happened, what flew through your character's head during this time, so that they also get to do a bit of a summary if something suddenly goes fast. And I think we kind of got there as well with that, and that is something that I feel is important as a player or as a GM, that you are clear with these things, that if you start to establish a certain pace, then if you need that time, then you will have to sort of either take it or be, I don't know, sometimes I suppose you have to be prepared to give it up if you are many players and you sort of need to get ahead for whatever reason, but it's very nice too.
One thing I will say is that it does change when you're doing something like a one-shot, or you want to finish something in 4 hours. Because then I'm the kind of person who I start thinking very actor, content producer type. And I will be like, I want to make sure this is finishing around this time, or I want to make sure this has been resolved. So that's different, but I feel that completely goes out the window if you're having fun with your friends. Yeah. You go for a beer with your friends, then it doesn't matter at all. Like, you have fun. Maybe when you're doing a one-shot in a professional standard, I do like to be, let's make sure the one shot is getting resolved by the hour, that sort of thing. But that, again, different priorities, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It's really all about what is the group there to do, and certainly in a one shot, you definitely want to ensure that you can tie some kind of ribbon on the story at the end of the day. I think it's also, if you're trying to run something that's very long, very big, but you have, for example, if you have very few game sessions, like let's say there's like a month between every game session, because you have, like that's how it would be before for me, like before the podcast, because people were so busy, it was very difficult to do more than maybe once or twice a month. So the little time that you did have, you sort of wanted to ensure that you actually got somewhere, that you actually made progress, that you didn't just sit around in a tavern talking about stuff that didn't really have an impact on anything for half the session. So I think those things also matter, of course, like what is it that you're trying to achieve? Is actually finishing things an important thing, or is it just the experience of spending time together? Because I mean, that's also important. And I think it's especially for especially for men, I think this is how we tend to interact with each other and like have conversations. Is not just sitting and talking about our feelings normally. It's like an activity through an activity that we tend to bond, right? So I think you should allow plenty of space for that as well. But it, at the end of the day, it comes down to listening to your group and giving them what they need.
Finding the compromises there can be a challenge sometimes.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So then exactly. Leave space for each other there, I would say, and that's the most important. Like if you feel like as a GM that you want to keep a certain pace or that things are going a bit slow, then I think it's cool that you sort of summarize what happened and you skip in time and then maybe ask the characters what they did during that time skip.
Mm-hmm.
I think could be an effective way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, time skipping is an interesting other topic, I suppose, that we could talk for a very long time about. But
yeah,
it's important that it's done in a correct way. In general, I'm not a huge fan of time skipping, but sometimes it's necessary, of course. I would say, like, going back to a lot of these old cult adventures, a lot of them, especially the Black Madonna, was just so full of, okay, now here a week is supposed to pass here. But you've had all these like intense events, and then it's like, okay, now nothing can happen for a week, is like the way that it's originally written. But like, what would you really do there? It's, So I'm in general more a fan of even if it can sort of seem like everything is happening ridiculously fast and during a very, very short time period.
Yeah,
I feel kind of
feels
okay
like
with that.
You got this curse mark. You think you might be about to die in a few months. How would you spend your week? It's not like you want to go back to your work and start sorting things out in your normal life if you suddenly have this other thing that needs to be resolved.
Mm-hmm.
To mention, it also depends on the game. Like, for example, I was in the game store the other day looking at the book for Legacy, Life Among the Ruins. Have you heard of that one?
Yeah. No?
I have heard of it, but I have a very vague view of what it is. What is it?
It's sort of like, from what I understand, again, correct me, Patreons, because I've also only just looked at it a little bit. I was looking at the book thinking it looked really cool, first of all. I think there the idea is supposed to be that you have adventures, but it's all part of like a little civilization you're building.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of like a Fallout type scenario, and you play these characters, but then you do time skip, because the whole point of the game is the time skipping. It's you discover a place to build your base, and then the next session you've built your base and you tell us about the base, and then the next session it's the war your base has with another base, and it's like this generation type game.
Yeah, as generations pass and your family evolves to suit this new world, what stories will you tell? Yeah, I mean, some games are really built around that mechanic. Like Pendragon, for example, it's about you're playing out the life of this knight as and I guess of this family, basically, where you have children and they grow, and every like session is a year of time, for example. Some games are built around, of course, that as well.
So I'd be up for playing a game like that one day. I'm like, that sounds cool.
The Great Pendragon campaign would be so cool to do. That's Greg Stafford who made that one. That's a legendary thing. So
cool.
But so many things to play.
On the list, yes. So let's see. Should different sections of an adventure be paced in different ways? We sort of touched on it a little bit, but I think we could explore that question a little bit more. Like, when does it need to go fast and when does it need to go quicker?
When does it need to go fast and when does it need to go quicker? Yeah. Well, I think that when it's like action sequences, like if you're thinking about it as kind of like a movie, like when there would be the fast cuts, when things would be really sort of like pop, happening. When that's sort of what you're looking for, then of course there you don't want to like break up the pace then with all of a sudden some random conversation between an NPC and one of the player characters, for example, that isn't like really leading to anything. Like, you as a GM know that this isn't really something that I can take anywhere. You want to ensure that kind of stuff doesn't necessarily happen. So yeah, I think definitely like in the action scenes you should definitely have a good quick pace forward. But you also need to create these kind of more normal, like, we need to at some point see the normal life of these characters. We need to sometimes like give them the space to just be who they are, so that we can start caring about them, and so that we can feel like they are real in some way. I mean, they're not real, but they should feel like they are actual people, so that we can care about them when things happen to them, bad things happen to them. We can sympathize and empathize, you know.
Yeah.
And then slower pace is
Yes.
is very important, I think, and to allow that to take time. But maybe a lot of that is also good to have in the beginning. What I have thought about, though, from a podcast perspective, is that you should have maybe some in medias res when it comes to, like, you know, really starting out with something a little bit action filled. Because I feel maybe, like, if you look at the Black Madonna, for example, it starts so slow in the beginning. And I don't know, maybe we lost some people there. Maybe it would have been better to somehow find something that starts out a bit more action filled, and then kind of go back to a little bit of a slower pace. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I don't know. I've been thinking about that because I often think of, obviously you guys love Black Madonna and that means a lot to us. But I do know a few people I showed it to were a bit like, it sounds okay, but I kind of had to get them to listen to 3 episodes before they went, oh, I see. Oh, it did get more interesting. And I don't know, because I like slow beginnings, but at the same time, I've been especially with some of our new seasons or new shows, I have been wondering how many do we get in the first episode, and then how many stick around, and is there how can you improve the first chapter of a book, if you will, to get people to read the next page. And I do actually agree that if my book writing stance, not that I do much at the moment, but normally is that I want to grab people from page 1, and you want to make them really enjoy your book from page 1. So it's tricky, though.
There's lots of different ways to do that, though. I mean, it doesn't have to be... You get tired, I think, listening to new stuff if it's always this sort of catch the listener or catch the viewer in this or that way. For example, it's been like that with new series that I've tried to watch. Some stuff where they just like, okay, let's throw in action and sex and nudity and everything in the first episode and try to hook someone. It just feels so cheap in a way. It's like sometimes you just want this getting to know it, I don't know, or finding something more subtle in a way. Right.
Just to add in here, when we look at some of the stats that we have, for example, because we have lots of data actually about the episodes. I can see here that it seems, for example, that if you take the Black Madonna as an example, the first episode here, the difference between the first and the second, we're losing basically 50% after the first episode. There's only they've downloaded the first episode, but it doesn't carry over into the second. And then there's a loss of another 30% or so over to the third. And then after that, it actually starts to become stable. So around the fourth episode, basically, it sort of is stable. And that was the fire episode, of course, which is where we have this Boss 12 incident with the apartment. And I feel like that's maybe one of our strongest episodes. And to me, I think that says a little bit about sort of the importance of starting out with something that really grabs people's attention. But then again, it's if I look at Strahd, for example, here, it looks like from first to second, we have a drop of about 30% there. So it's a little bit of a lower one, but
we're fighting wolves.
Yeah,
Come
exactly.
on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that one has
Super exciting.
actually. That one actually starts out with action very, very quickly. There is some conversation in the beginning, but already in the first episode,
It's a nice moody beginning as well.
We're fighting, and it doesn't have to be just combat. It's just there has to be something like really tense. I mean, the first episode of Black Madonna, for example, ends with an there's some weird stuff happens, but nothing like overly weird, and then it's like, oh, there's someone with night vision goggles looking at you. It's like, okay, yeah, that's kind of interesting, but it's just the last line, you know.
Interestingly, Coriolis, I noticed, was a little more consistent when we did the one of those that the viewer base seemed to stay the same between all three of them, roughly.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and that one is very much doing the in medias res thing of really throwing you into the action and throwing the characters into a situation. And there's pros and cons to that as well, because I mean, a pro is that you really get to see the characters acting in some kind of situation, but a con is that, well, you're not seeing them in their normal mundane lives. So, have you found a way to care about them yet? That can be tough.
Also, I feel the tricky thing there is when you run published adventures. Because the whole point, I feel, of a published adventure is that they're not designed to be like, you're going to play one session, and if you aren't loving it, you stop. The whole point is, you're going to be playing this adventure. You are there for the adventure. You're like, episode 1 might be awesome, but you're expecting great things to happen, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You don't feel like, the beginning to Curse of Strahd, for example, is interesting, but the point of Curse of Strahd is the adventure of, you're going to go and get these things, and one day you're going to go to the castle and fight the Count. That's the hook. The very first episode is just getting you there.
Yeah.
In terms of, like, role-playing it as a book. It's the same with most D&D adventures I've done. Like, I mean, I played, I won't spoil it too much here, but in Out of the Abyss, the introduction to that is actually quite controversial. I know a few people who've said they don't like the introduction to that adventure because it's sort of like a situation where you are in a sort of environment where it's not your usual sort of thing. I don't want to spoil, but let's say it's along the lines of sort of like, you are in this place, you have none of your stuff, and you're in danger. Let's go.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it a lot, the way we did it. It was fun, but it was very different. And then the adventure basically after the first couple of sessions, it was like, right, we did it. Now the adventure begins. Yeah.
And that sounds a bit like Coriolis, and I can relate to what you said there, Matthias, about sort of, but what are these characters like? What would they be in a normal situation? Because now they're just thrown into something. And I had so many ideas of what I wanted this character to be, but it's like you can't just fit it in there if you're suddenly in a tense situation, so it will have to come slowly instead. Which, has its pros and cons, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, there are sort of proven ways of telling stories, and I mean, you take a movie like The Rock, for example. Yeah, it's a pretty standard story. It's very successful at what it does, and what it does is it begins with this heist to steal these rockets and to steal this gas. There's like action in the beginning already. Boom, we're introduced to the main villain, and then we get to meet Stanley Goodspeed as he's like hanging out with his girlfriend and having sex in the morning or whatever it was they're doing there. And then he's sort of pulled into this situation, but we sort of get to make this connection with him and to start caring about him as if he is a normal person and not, some just action character, really. And then after that, it really, of course, escalates. But I think that there's a reason why movies tend to do that. Take that approach.
And it doesn't need to be very long. I mean, the action sequence at the start. No. It's like, it could be something in terms when you get a few characters sort of thrown at you. You often get one of their traits, like if they stand out a little bit, and you're like, okay, you start to be a bit curious, and then it slows down a little bit. And it could be a really short sequence. It could be like, basically, it feels like almost a classic now, but a dream sequence, which starts and could be almost just, narrative. Like maybe a bit like Taroticum, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, Taroticum certainly does that. It has a dream that it begins with. I mean, you can say that it has this entire prologue in 1892 also. This is true. That is, in of itself, also built to make things happen relatively quickly. You're not supposed to spend too much time there. But compared to maybe the normal adventure, things happen a little bit quicker. Although I'll say, I think Taroticum in general is one where things, they just really happen very quickly in that one. And the idea is really to sort of pull you into this weird world that cult can be.
And I definitely, to sort of tie it back to the question, I definitely do think that different sections of an adventure should be paced in a different ways, especially if you feel that players are sort of getting stuck in, for example, like a planning situation, or basically you feel that, okay, the coming content here is going to be still in the same setting with the same sort of enemies that they're going to face. It's not going to evolve into something more interesting than this. Then let's perhaps try and find either a way out or add a new element to this setting if we want the characters to stay around a little bit more. Because it can be, I feel, a little bit like, okay, so it's this element again that we're going to have to face. We're going to have to fight these enemies again in order to get by to something that we thought was new, so to speak.
Or
very
you
vague,
could
so,
just
yeah.
cast Calm Emotions, and that gets you out of every single combat encounter.
It works every time,
Actually,
like a
I think
charm.
silence is better, yes.
Every time. Hey, it worked like one time almost. I liked it.
Yeah. It had its. It would have its purpose. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Calm
should've
emotions was just really like wanting to not do too much combat, basically, because I like combat, but it can also really drag out, sometimes.
This is true.
Very
Es-
practical of you to have that spell.
Yep. I thought of that when I
Especially
chose
in
it.
D&D.
Yep.
But
Of course.
when I first saw this question, like, should it be paced in different ways, then I immediately thought of combat and how, yes, combat, for my part, can be quickened up quite a bit, and it can be nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that depends also on, again, what are you playing to do,
Yeah.
and are you a group that is all about that combat grind and about like leveling up your characters and about like tactical combat maps and that kind of stuff. I mean, if that's your deal, then combat is what it's all about. Not everyone
Yeah.
is into what we're into. Basically, there's
Yeah.
there's plenty of people who play role playing games for different reasons. So yeah, whatever
Absolutely.
floats your boat, man.
Do we want to go on to the next question as well? There's one more here.
Yeah,
that's
certainly,
one-
let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's see. How do you create ample room for the player characters to develop in a sensible fashion without the story stalling or grinding to a halt? What are your techniques? Your secret techniques?
Well, I feel everything I've said already. Kind of that question maybe
It
not
kinda
for me.
relates to it, yeah.
Again, I feel characters should have their time to develop, and the narrative of the game itself should also help that happen. If that's happening, you shouldn't feel like, oh no, the game's not continuing because we're finding out about Hjalmar's character. It should feel the game is finding about Hjalmar's character. And of course that sounds very easy the way I've said that, but it's not. But I've made it sound like, oh, it's so easy. But it's a challenge, but a fun challenge.
I like the small sort of reflections that you can throw in there. If you take Terroticum as an example, when we start off and one character is in a cab, the cabbie is not talking to the character. GM Matthias, Master GM, says, "What do you think about this? How do you feel about this? Do you prefer people not talking to you, or do you like a bit of conversation?" I mean, that's a really small thing, but it gives you a little bit. It's like, it's not gonna give you a huge monologue about your character's deepest feelings, probably, but it gives you a little, a little tell about the character.
Yeah, I mean, I try to throw in stuff like that all the time. I mean, it's like why, for example, I asked Vahid, hey, what do you think about graffiti in subways? Because that tells you a lot, actually, about a person, how they feel about the common spaces that we have, and like, what do they think is beautiful,
Mm.
And that's something that you can actually do quite a lot with, that, simple questions like that. When it comes to like techniques on how to just allowing the characters to develop, I think it's a lot about, as a GM, just daring to shut up also, and just letting the characters have those conversations, and if when you will feel when they have energy and they're moving things forward, and you will feel when they don't, and when they don't, then you can like throw in subtle hints to sort of try to move things along. But when people are like conversing and having like, you feel like the energy in the room or over the call, if you will, then just let them go. Just sit back and relax and enjoy, because that's your time to enjoy as a GM.
Yeah. And I feel it's so important as a player to have that, because no matter how much you prepare, that bit to me is still a bit of exploration. That's when you establish small things like Roshik's axe in the head thing that kept coming back.
Gift that kept giving.
And you kept mentioning it, and eventually I went, you know what? Let's dig deep. And we dug deep into one little joke and made it hilarious and scary at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think that's one thing too. Yeah. As a GM, you can lean back a bit, you can enjoy it, and then you can oh, this could be something that I could use, perhaps. Make use of their conversations. Yeah. I like that.
This has not been a good conversation, Patreons, because I now am in the mood for some role playing, and unfortunately, I think we're gonna have to wait a bit for that.
Aw.
When are we next role playing, Craig?
I think in a
Oh
week.
no. Yes.
Yes.
It's not until. Yes.
The 20th.
Next Tuesday, isn't it?
Yup.
Unacceptable.
Come.
Yay.
Unacceptable. I wanna play right now. Let's do it right now. Impromptu roleplay. You guys are all podcasters talking about roleplaying, and we're answering questions. Go.
I think
Okay.
I want to start wrapping up the show immediately. Just as a podcaster, I feel like my work is done. I've started the podcast, I've created the MP3, and it's done now. Now I just cash in, I just get that big podcast money.
No,
just
I'm sorry, you need to
ching-a-ching.
roll podcast skill. Do you have a specialty in that?
And, no.
Well, in that case, you roll at a -200.
All right, I roll 3.
I'm afraid your podcast is not only hated worldwide, but you yourself are actually now despised. Except by the podcast hate faction. They love you.
But they're very small and without power.
They are very small.
Oh no, my
Yes.
computer caught on fire too now. Oh, damn. The file was just so bad.
My character has to go to the toilet.
Very well. Well, in that case, we shall say... Are we saying farewell, listeners,
Yes.
for another Ask for
We've got to put some more hamsters in the microwave first, though, don't we?
No.
Silence.
No.
Your judgment has been decided.
It's no longer the hamsters that go in the microwave. It's time to put you in there as well, Matthias.
Also, Patreons, let us know if you'd like to petition for Hjalmar to have his next role-playing character be this one.
Yeah.
Creepy microwave
It is
man.
microwave. It is coming for you.
Creepy
Matthias.
microwave man.
That's it. Go in the microwave. Microwave. Yes!
Yeah.